the Russian invasion of the Ukraine has been sort of put up or shut up for people. And, there was a vote in Congress to I think it called it was about calling off trade with Russia, U.S. trade with Russia, ending that. So they were going to pass a law to that effect, and it passed almost unanimously, but there were 8 people who voted against it, and those were all Republicans, and they were like what we sometimes refer to as Putin Republicans, I would say. They're the far right-wing people. It was like people like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, and unfortunately, my representative in Congress, Chip Roy, was one of those people.
The whole thing of suddenly we have some bipartisanship, and I think that's scaring a lot of the Republicans, seeing that there are places where the Democrats and Republicans kind of have to agree to band together and show a united front, because it's suddenly wartime. It's not us at war, but kind of is. We're trying to keep a nation in Eastern Europe afloat, and Russia is trying to sink them. So that's kind of warfare, and that was what happened in World War II. There was a lot of dissension, but between the Republicans and Democrats, before World War II. But when war broke out, they kind of had to all band together. This time on the Plutopia podcast, we have some very special guests. John Lubkowski and Scoop Sweeney. That's us. And we're going to talk to you this time about South by Southwest, Russia, Mojo Nixon, future plans for our podcast, and much more.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Plutopia News Network. And today it's just Scoop and I. Scoop Sweeney over in Elgin, Bastrop area, somewhere out there.
Yes, out in the magical forest outside Austin. That's as close as I'll let you know. It keeps the crazies in Bastrop County from coming after me.
He lives in a large cave out there somewhere.
Yes, it's a cave. It's, nice decorations and everything. We have some well-dressed bats hanging from the roof. So we call it home, or homely, something like that.
And I'm John Lubkowski, and I live at the top of a large mansion in Southwest Austin. It's a 12-story mansion with a roof. And they make me go up and just kind of spend my time on the roof.
Up on the I think that song's been done, so we won't break into that.
Pretty good song, though. You got to admit it. Who's that by? Carole King and Jerry Goffin?
I think everything in the 60s was by Carole King and Jerry Goffin.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. They were prolific, weren't they?
Yeah, they went beyond prolific, whatever the next level is. But a great bunch of stuff. Anyway, you've been to South by, John, haven't you? Is it booming and banging and rambling around in downtown Austin?
Well, yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's a little bizarre because I have been tucked away inside of my house for the most part for the last 2 years. I mean, it was actually March 2 years ago when COVID became the kind of thing that you really worry about to the extent that you're washing your groceries. And I am unaccustomed to the sight of people without masks roaming the streets and roaming the halls and corridors of a place like the Austin Convention Center. But that's what we have now. COVID is not very prevalent. In fact, it's hardly noticeable at the moment. And people are taking advantage of that to do the stuff that they always did and the way they always did it. So South by Southwest actually does have a lot of people hanging out, mask free for the most part. It's actually kind of a mix. There's a lot of people who have masks, but well, it's a very tiny minority. There are some people who have masks. Um, you don't really notice them that much though, because so many don't. And that, that kind of throws you now because you're so used to being extremely cautious.
There used to be a time in downtown Austin when you were hoping to not see people on the streets wearing masks. That was pre-pandemic. Generally, those folks were going to ask you for your wallet
Exactly.
and whatever else you had in your possession. Now it's reversed. You get nervous when you see the maskless headed your way. I still take mine with me, and I go, when I'm outside, I try to just stay away from people and stay away from the mask. But inside, I'm I'm masked all the time.
Yeah, I've always just pretended that I'm Zorro when I'm wearing that thing.
Who was that masked man?
Exactly. So we went downtown to get our badges last week, and the Edu conference was going on at the time we were down there, and there wasn't a huge crowd for Edu. It's a much smaller conference. And then this week we found, so the conference is a hybrid conference. It's both virtual, it's both online and offline. A limited but fairly substantial amount of their programming is online, and you can just watch it online. So if you live in Austin, if you live in Austin, you can choose some things to do on and some things to do offline. I think if somebody lived outside of Austin, they would probably want to either do the online version or do the face-to-face version, the physical version, or IRL, as they say. And I took advantage of the virtual availability, primarily of films, but also of some of the sessions. A few panels are available online, and a lot of the larger featured sessions. So for instance, Neil Stevenson gave a talk the other day, and you could watch that online. It happens that I was in the room for that one because I had to be down there anyway. That was Wednesday. Wednesday is the only day that we spent substantial time downtown because I had to introduce Bruce Sterling for his talk at 2:30 on Wednesday. So we went down, kind of early in the morning. We found a place to park. It was much easier than usual. So I'm pretty sure there's not as, this is a much smaller crowd. It looks crowded. There's a lot of people wandering around. The streets are full, but compared to previous years, it's just not as crowded. There's not as many people. I think they've had a decent turnout. I asked Hugh Forrest, and he said, yeah, they've had a pretty good crowd this year. They've had a lot of people signed up, and who knows how many are taking advantage of the virtual version of the conference.
Now, is there a virtual version available to the public after the fact?
A lot of the stuff's going to be on YouTube eventually, and a lot of it will be on YouTube for anybody and everybody. But for some period of time, you'd have to have signed up. And there's actually a number of levels that you can sign up for. For instance, you get a platinum pass, and you can go to anything and everything in real life or virtual. But there is something like, for instance, they have I think for $75 or so, you could buy a pass that would allow you to watch only shorts and watch those online. And there was like I think it was $525, probably less earlier, but it was around $525 to buy an online pass that would allow you to do, I guess, pretty much all the online stuff, but not show up in real life.
That's quite a bit more than last year, because I did the virtual last year. I don't think I coughed up quite that much, but
Well, in a past year, for let's say, for instance, Neil Stevenson, the one session that we actually went to IRL in real life, other than Bruce's, and in a previous year, you would have seen a long line outside of that thing, and you would have really needed what they call their South by Express pass, which I was trying to get. I actually had a South by Express pass for this one, but when we showed up, there was no line. We just walked right in, and there was plenty of seating and no trouble getting in. That tells me that it's a much smaller crowd in real life.
Could it be that it's
the room
also a
wasn't
little
full.
different crowd in real life than previous years? Because from what I've heard to some friends that have been down there, that there's a different vibe down there from previous years. Maybe not so techie oriented as perhaps music and film oriented.
Well, it's a media conference. People may think of it as a tech conference. I certainly tended to, because I was mostly focused on the interactive in past years. But the conference has evolved so that film and interactive and music have somewhat merged in that they're all media. They all have strong digital representation, and it's so we used to talk about the concept of digital convergence. I was a member of a South Texas Digital Convergence Initiative years ago, and what we predicted has come true. We predicted that all of these forms of media would start to really merge and flow together, because they're all digital media. Eventually, they would all be digital media, and that's come to pass. So the people who show up for this are interested in media in a more general sense, a lot of them. And you also have a lot of people who show up for business reasons. And there's a lot of business and marketing focus within the conference, which was, like 20 years ago, that wasn't really the case. It was this funky little conference, especially interactive, this funky little conference that had people who were sort of like at the cutting edge of technology. Well, you still have people who are like at cutting edges of things, but it's like everything. I mean, you have Pete Buttigieg. He's not really a media person per se, though, he's heavily represented in media, but he is a politician. So you have some politicians who show up, and you have there's a number of sessions pretty much every year about space, and more recently the commercialization of outer space, and how business is forming around it, and how private companies are starting to take over the like space, traveling in space, and space exploration. And we may have, like The Expanse, at some point, we may have people mining asteroids,
Well, the politicians
that thrust was always potential, but you're seeing it now, and it's represented at South by Southwest, and that's a totally non-media thing. So there's all kinds of other things that have been brought into it.
Yeah, the politicians seem to show up, especially particularly when it's a big election year. But they have had a presence pretty much every South by. There's whoever's the current big political name, especially in the Democratic Party, tends to show up. Had Obama one year, but one thing
the
I've
thing
noticed,
that we watched that was political was Evan Smith's interview with Beto O'Rourke, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah,
he's
the
about
current
halfway
big
through
name.
it. I was thinking, now Beto's a non-starter. This isn't going to work, because there were some weaknesses in some of his arguments, and he tended to deflect a lot, and he did the political thing of somebody asks you a question that you don't have a good answer for, so you just grab from your talking points. But there was some more substantial stuff later in the interview where you could see that he was really starting to do a good job of showing his contrast with Greg Abbott. And I think the real potential that Beto has is through the fact that he is going out all over the state and talking to people. He apparently has hit every county in the state and intends to do that again and again until the election. And he's just going out and talking to people and making his case. And that can be very powerful in Texas, I think.
Yeah, on the other hand, Governor Abbott has been pretty much missing in action when it comes to any kind of debate. He has, avoided debates of any kind, and he's apparently continuing that policy this election period because they've tried to get him. A lot of organizations have tried to get him to do a debate with Beto, and of course, there's been big silence from the state capitol in that subject, and I just see him wanting to ride on the laurels bestowed upon him by Trump and his crowd, even though that's kind of questionable laurels these days.
Well, those guys have been busily at work constructing their house, but it's a house of cards, I think. I didn't think so for a while. I mean, it seemed like they really had that they had such a force that they were going to kind of overwhelm everything. But it's kind of falling apart right now. And there's increasing, I think, contention about Trump within the Republican Party, and particularly this thing with Russia.
Yeah,
this thing with Russia has definitely, the Russian invasion of the Ukraine has been sort of put up or shut up for people. And, there was a vote in Congress to I think it it was about calling off trade with Russia, U.S. trade with Russia, ending that. So they were going to pass a law to that effect, and it passed almost unanimously, but there were 8 people who voted it against it. And those were all Republicans, and they were like what we sometimes refer to as Putin Republicans, I would say. They're the far right wing people. It was like people like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. And unfortunately, my representative in Congress, Chip Roy, was one of those people.
Yeah, there's a fine gentleman there. He says a lot of good things lately, mostly objectionable. But, the whole thing of suddenly we have some bipartisanship, and I think that's scaring a lot of the Republicans, seeing that there are places where the Democrats and Republicans kind of have to agree to band together and show a united front because it's suddenly wartime. It's not us at war, but kind of is. We're trying to keep a nation in Eastern Europe afloat, and Russia is trying to sink them. So that's kind of warfare, and that was what happened in World War II. There was a lot of dissension, but between the Republicans and Democrats, before World War II. But when war broke out, they kind of had to all band together because anybody that spoke out against it was a traitor.
And I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that Putin has a role in the GOP, that he is a funder of Republican candidates, and that some of them at least sympathize with him, if not answer to it.
Well, Comrade Carlson is definitely a asset of the Russians.
Yeah, a confirmed Russian asset. That's true. But the other thing is that, these guys have, from Trump, they learned the politics of nastiness, and they've gotten nastier and nastier as time has gone by. And I think that at some point falls apart. I think people get really tired of that shit.
Yeah,
So I
most
think that,
people object to that kind of behavior in their personal lives, and when it's bombarding you constantly, you kind of turn it off and try to find something less negative, because negativity is the flavor of the month coming out of Fox News and all the conservative outlets.
yeah, and it's just hard to take them seriously anymore. I mean, some of the claims that they make are so increasingly outlandish that eventually people got to see through that kind of stuff. So there's that. I mean, that's going on. I'm trying to think. So I was talking about how the conference is a hybrid conference. I think it works really well as a hybrid conference, especially the film stuff. If you're attending the film festival, and it's actually a festival. We keep calling it a conference. It's a conference and a festival. And the film festival is something that we've grown very fond of. It's an excellent film festival. They always have a lot of great stuff, and it's very well curated. And the problem with it is always, how many films can you see in a day if you have to wade through crowds to get from one venue to another and ride shuttles that are stuck in traffic and that sort of thing. So virtualizing that and putting those films online will allow you to watch a lot more films in a day. The downside of that is that you don't get the like Q&A sessions that follow the films tend to, and the big highlighted films, the bigger films that are like usually screened on the first weekend are not included as virtual programming.
The upside of the virtual movie viewing is you're not inundated with the armchair film critics who will surround you. I've been to some film festivals to where you couldn't hear the movie because the self-made, film critics were going on as you're trying to listen, and I would not miss that at all. So I would love to have a virtual film festival available.
Yeah, I mean, you can always get popcorn at home, that sort of thing. It works pretty well. Like I say, I missed the Q&As. I didn't miss. I particularly didn't miss having to move around and find ways to park and find ways to get from one place to another. The films that we will see in theaters, we're going to see like today and tomorrow. And those are just a couple that one is not virtual. It's Apollo 10.5 by Rick Linklater. And I regret that we couldn't go to the initial screening of it, because this second or third screening during the festival, and it probably won't have any kind of Q&A with it. But I mean, a lot of our choices about doing that stuff was just avoiding the hassle of going downtown and wading into things, since we had plenty of programming available to us in our living room. That worked out pretty well.
The music side of South by, that was basically how it began in the early years, being a platform for local artists, Austin and Central Texas artists, to get noticed.
Yeah.
And over the many years, it's actually become, it's switched from, trying to, get exposure for struggling artists to getting exposure for artists who really don't need the help because they're already megastars. And I've heard a lot of grumbling from local musicians that, why are we helping these guys? They're already multimillionaires.
Well, my understanding about the founding of and the origin of South by Southwest originally was a music festival. And there had been a new music festival in New York that was pretty well received, and people here in Austin, at the Austin Chronicle particularly, said, why couldn't we do something like that here? We're like a big music city. Let's do it. And that's why they started South by Southwest, again, originally as a music conference. And I'm not exactly sure when they added film, but I know that they added multimedia in 1992, I think it was. I went to the first South by Southwest multimedia conference, and what it was, there were a bunch of guys with like CD-ROM programming showing their stuff. That was kind of a big part of what they were doing there. And it continued to be called like multimedia for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years after that, before it became interactive. And I can actually remember in the early 90s talking to the people at South by Southwest, strongly encouraging them to include some content about the internet, saying, I think the internet is going to be kind of a big deal. And, it's already getting kind of rich. There's a lot that you could talk about there. You could really have some good sessions, good material. And they did, within a couple of years, include internet, not because I asked for it alone, but because, they realized it too. And after they started the Interactive Festival, they were running basically 3 festivals together. And at some point, they also included like the idea of the platinum badge, Go Badge, platinum badge. There was a Gold badge that you could get that would be film and interactive, and there was a platinum that you could get that was film, interactive, and music. And then you could get separate badges. And all that stuff was siloed for years in that sense. And, we would go down, we tended to go to all 3 and have all along. And that's a pretty rich experience. It's almost overwhelming. I've had years when I was just exhausted at the end of South by Southwest. I could barely walk. I was just completely wiped out. And it's because you're just constantly running and there's constantly things to do. And you have, huge numbers of inputs, and you can't even kind of think through sorting it all out. Very, very stimulating, massively stimulating. And as we said, it's evolved over the years, and it's really changed. And one thing that's changed is that the marketing element has become a much bigger part of it, bigger aspect of it. I don't want to say that it's lost some of the like sense of creativity that was included before, but actually it's kind of like that. I mean, it's become like a big corporate event. There's still interesting stuff going on all over the place. One of which is, well, we were talking about before we started the show, the Banksy exhibit over on South Congress. There's a place called Atmosphere, which I think is an ad agency. And they co-sponsored or worked with, I'm not sure whether they own this art or whether somebody else owns it and they brought it in, but they were instrumental in setting this thing up. And they have this incredible exhibit. It's supposedly the largest collection of Banksy material in any one place. And we went down there today and spent an hour or so in there, just sort of amazed at the breadth of material.
Yeah, it's amazing that
we wouldn't see that if it wasn't for South by Southwest. It's part of South by Southwest. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's amazing that the progression of Banksy's works, because it was originally just weird street art that people would discover, And somewhere along the line, it became serious big bucks art. They've auctioned off some of those pieces for amazing amounts, and that's kind of the way a lot of digital culture has progressed. Stuff that was just funky stuff we were doing in our basements and bedrooms, on a cheap little laptop or something. It suddenly has become big business because you have
get
people
all slickified and you can attach an NFT to it.
Yeah, but you could produce a platinum-selling record album in your bedroom if you have enough talent and the right equipment, and a lot of people have done that already and continue doing it. You could produce a movie with your phone, and I've seen some of those, and they're way more entertaining than the ones where they've got the 90-person film crew out on location. And so, the digital culture that we've watched progress here in Austin and elsewhere, myself in the Bay Area, just amazing where it started and where it's ended up so far.
And there was another exhibit that we went to last weekend that Meow Wolf did here in town, and that was pretty substantial too. Keep talking while I'm looking something up here.
Oh, another one of those digital interventions there. The power of the Google search. You remember the early search engines?
Information about this thing. It was so the Meow Wolf thing was an interdimensional portal at the spatial holodeck, an experience with infinite potential of immersive technologies to enhance human experiences in real-world environments. And it had, it was like an audio-visual thing. It was a bunch of, like, in effect, I don't know, what would you call them? Installations, sculptures. And it told a story, as the Meow Wolf stuff will do. It was very sort of odd and weird and fun and amazing. And there was also some Meow Wolf programming at South by Southwest. Now that Meow Wolf is, it's kind of turned into a big deal, but it's a very creative, it's a rather large entity that just creates stuff, that makes art, conceptual art. And I can't recall anything quite like it before. It's not exactly like a museum. It's not like any other art organization that I can recall. Maybe a little bit like, at least conceptually, like Artmark, which was an early digital art collective.
Well, its success means that it definitely has a gift shop, just like you get in the airport or in a museum. They've gotten enough, popularity that people want to own some Meow Wolf.
And they have a gift shop at the actual Meow Wolf facilities. They didn't at this particular place, but Marcia and I we were recently in Santa Fe, where the original Meow Wolf facility is still operating and actually very busy. They have a lot of people moving through there. Our friend Michael Garfield was recently setting up to play music there. And they have a big gift shop. And in fact, when we were there recently, we asked them if we could just go to the gift shop. It hadn't been that long since we had been through the actual installation. So what we wanted to do was shop. And we did it, man, with a vengeance. I'm looking at their online shop right now as I talk, and it's like, yeah, they have some very interesting stuff. So they're commercial and they're commercially viable.
Well, that's the first sign of success when you have a gift shop or merchandise. We have merchandise. Does that mean we're successful, John? Are we going to have a gift shop downtown?
I'm, I think it's time.
Yeah. Come
It's
on
an idea
down.
whose time has come.
Come down to Plutopia Towers and pick up your John Lebkowski bobblehead doll.
I bet we can make twice as much next year as we did this year.
What with the John Lebkowski bobblehead doll?
Exactly.
I'd pay good money for one of those just to put on the dashboard of my car. No, wait, that was another song. We won't go there.
So one of our best experiences was last night, in the virtual part of the conference, the screening of the Mojo Manifesto, the lives and times of Mojo Nixon.
Ah, yes.
You remember Mojo Nixon?
I've been to many Mojo Nixon extravaganzas over the years. He used to visit the Bay Area a lot. Skid Roper, all the good folks.
Well, and of course they used to. They were a big presence here in Austin for many years. And this particular film is like an excellent documentary. There was a lot of film and video available of various performances throughout the years. And man, this was just nuts. It's inspirational.
Well, he is inspirational and crazy as well, I believe, because of the stuff he's able to get away with. My favorite Mojo Nixon recording, Elvis is Everywhere.
Yep. A lot
Elvis
of people love
everything.
That one. Well, I compared him to Donald Trump in that, like Donald Trump, he doesn't give a fuck. But the difference is that Donald Trump has zero empathy, no heart, doesn't care about anybody, and is basically a really bad guy.
And Mojo's not mean-spirited.
Nixon has a huge heart and loves everybody and is a really good guy.
Yep, mean-spirited is not his forte, but it certainly is that of Trump. So if you don't know the meaning of Mojo and his mojo, you should go onto YouTube and just query Mojo Nixon, and you will find some really interesting and perhaps pornographic stuff, and depending on your outlook on life. I don't consider anything pornographic, but some folks will.
And there was a great silence there as I ponder the mojo-ness of all of this. Yeah, Mojo Nixon was Kirby McMillan, of course, I guess is his real name. Neil Kirby McMillan Jr. Had a pretty long career. Actually, those guys still play apparently every year during South by Southwest, but I don't know whether they're playing this year. They have continued to play one show a year, basically. And the Mojo today is kind of just an older version of himself, and he's all full of piss and vinegar. He was interviewed quite a bit for the documentary. I'm trying to find the name. There was a song that he wrote, something about Debbie Gibson is having my love child or something to that. Do you know that song?
I missed that one. I was going to say Gin Guzzling Frenzy was another one, and it was a barbecue song. A lot of good artful stuff. And
I got it. Debbie Gibson is pregnant with my two-headed love child.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, how could you object to something like that? When I grow up, I want to be Mojo Nixon.
And when he made the video for that song, he convinced Winona Ryder to play Debbie Gibson. And incidentally, we saw a film with Winona Ryder this week called The Cow. And I can't really talk to you about it because pretty much if I get into it, I'm going to give it away. It's like very twisty. but it was really a cool kind of thriller, you know.
Well, Winona's been a little twisty at it on occasion, so it
Well, she's
sounds.
had her moments, yeah.
Yes.
She was a shoplifter.
Among other things, but yeah, she got better.
So I'm trying to think if there's anything I can add about South by Southwest. Uh, it was a pretty interesting week down there. We hung out, you know, a bit with Bruce Sterling and Yasmina Chasanovic, our friends that come to town every year. And as I said, I got up on the stage and introduced Bruce as I do every year. And I think the room was less full than it usually is there too, pretty much for everything. But it was an enthusiastic audience.
Well, the virus tended to impact a lot of public venues like this. Crowds have been down at a number of big festivals around the country, so you shouldn't be surprised that the initial one here will be a little more low key. But I would imagine next year we'll see more of a turnout than they've seen this year.
Sure, if we survive another year, that may very well happen.
Yeah, but one thing, some friends of mine that live in the general area of downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods usually schedule their spring vacation during South by so they can get away and have some peace and quiet. And of course, some of them will try to rent their houses out while they're out of town, get that extra income. But I would imagine those have even seen a bit of a downturn. The party house rentals.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's not surprising. I mean, I would have been shocked if there had been a full size South by Southwest crowd there, and it was almost too much. It was getting to the point where you couldn't get into things. That was kind of a problem. So it was a much more comfortable festival, I think, this year.
Yeah,
it was when it was like sort of overwhelmingly crowded.
Yeah, it's kind of like your houseplants. Sometimes need to be pruned to become more healthy houseplants. Sometimes events need a little pruning as well. I've experienced that back in my event production days in the Bay Area. That we had one that got way out of control to the point where we had a riot. And so it had to be pruned way back because sometimes you get too popular and people show up that you really don't want to have showing up. In this case, it was a riot that showed up. So sometimes pruning helps.
I'd say that South by Southwest is generally a riot.
There's a riot going on. Huh? My first experience with South by, I guess, was 2010 when you got me involved with the Plutopia interactive after party, and then going around downtown trying to see what I could round up as far as interest and, try to circulate some of the posters. It was crazy. I'd leave. It's like, no, I'm not going to be able to get anything done because there's too many people.
That was the year that we did the science of music.
Right.
And I'm trying to remember who we had there. We had DJ Spooky.
Yeah.
The Black Liberation Front.
There were some Chinese artists that...
Zhao He, yeah.
And those were interesting performances. And, the next year when we had the open bar there, that was way too successful.
Well, yeah, I mean, we did have a good turnout for the bar.
Yeah.
But the problem that we had was that in order to give away free booze, we had to make it completely free, i.e., the booze had to be served with no requirement to pay at the door, basically. So we had to put it sort of outside the entrance where we were taking money, but we would let people in and let them drink at their leisure. So we had a lot of people who showed up for the open bar, which was I mean, it's a pretty interesting thing. It was, we had the Tipsy Texan helping us with it. And we had an amazing array of concoctions there. It was a huge success as far as numbers, turnout, exposure for the people who were featured, but we didn't make any money from those people, really. A few might have wandered into the rest of the event and paid.
There was a big turnout at the local clinics the next day from all the terminal hangovers because I had to help escort a few overserved folks. It's like, come on, Skippy, you got to go now. You can't live here tonight. And they were draped all over the lounging furniture that we had put out around the plaza there. And some of them were permanently draped. They weren't going anywhere for a while. So that's one of the drawbacks of having the big bar thing is sometimes people tend to overindulge, and they can be, shall we say, a pain in the ass to deal with.
I'm trying to remember. Let's see. We had Lee Ronaldo's band, right?
Yeah, that was for the Future of Play on 2011.
That's the year we had the Immersion Chamber, the Hanging Garden, the Experiment, and the Playground. We had Nuno Correa there from Portugal, the Theater of the Senses. The Hanging Garden included Kuzma Flora, the French art collective Sino Cosme put that thing together. Or no, they had the Spheralius device, a mobile device with sensors that create sonorous shapes.
Yeah, we had the Orbotics rolling ball there, which I found fascinating. I don't know.
That was a hoot.
It was an interesting doodad, but it had good technology behind it that probably was used for something useful, but actually rolling balls kind of get boring after a while. But the technology that made it roll was quite interesting.
And, Sphero has hung in there. They're still doing a lot of stuff. They have STEAM learning solutions, so they're doing educational stuff.
Yeah, I think they marketed their UI to a lot of different companies who needed that kind of thing. That was the thing that impressed me the most was their user interface to make this thing do its thing.
I guess I'm wrong about it. I thought that they had produced a droid too. But
I think they were trying to. When we interviewed, I forget the guy's name, one of the execs we interviewed for one of our early podcasts, they were trying to work on other mobile devices, using their user interface.
Yeah, his name was Ian Bernstein.
Yeah, Ian.
And, now that I think about it, Orbotics was the name of the company, and Sphero was the
that was the product. Yeah, the rolling ball, which fascinated everyone. Everyone wanted to go play with it because you could control it with your smartphone.
I'm looking now to see whether Orbotics is still happening. Yeah, the Sphero company now is just Orbotics renamed, and I think you can still find those Sphero balls here and there. That's kind of fascinating. I never did get one of those things. I probably should have. I'm trying to remember who else we had at that event. I definitely remember that Lee Ronaldo's band was a little, how can I put it? A little far out for some of the people who were there.
Yeah, it was a bit. I mean, they were what was the movie that we were screening? We had a projection of I can't remember the avant-garde movie. Anyway, that was screening behind Ronaldo's group as they played, and it was an acquired taste. You have to be into electronic music, which I've been for a long time, because that had a bit of that feel, very avant-garde electronica.
What I remember is that when he started playing, it sort of politicized the audience. A lot of people came running out of the place, but a lot of people just moved in that much tighter because they were digging it. I was one of those. I thought it was great myself. I'm trying to remember what that film was. Was it Text of Light?
Yeah.
That was it. And we also had Null Sleep doing his 8-bit performance there. I was surprised at how good that was.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. I didn't know
anything about 8-bit or Null Sleep, rather.
But yeah, that was good stuff, and I enjoyed doing those events. But the next year, 2012, we tried to put it together, and it was no longer possible for independents such as us to get their hands on a decent event space. Things that we were formerly able to rent for a few $1,000s suddenly were $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for one night, and it's like, no. But that's because the influx of the Sonys and the Yamahas and all the big corporations, all the big record labels, just basically sucked up all the rental space for their product promotions, and that's fine and dandy, but you should leave a little room for the locals to do it, because we costed it out, and I was running spreadsheets to see what it would cost, and it was not doable even at smaller venues because the prices had just escalated. But of course, prices in Austin have escalated in many ways, housing, rentals.
Well, the problem with our Plutopia event, I mean, it was a big, crazy, wonderful event, right? But it was expensive to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And we needed sponsors. And, we started doing it in 2009 after there had been that big crash in 2008, and people just weren't spending money. So we always had trouble getting sponsors for the thing. We were never going to be able to fund it through door charges, especially since because of our cooperation with South by Southwest, we had to admit badge holders for free. So that was just a practical issue that we had. We really could not support the event unless we could find major funding. And we kept thinking that, well, next year, the funding will come through, and it really wasn't coming through.
Well, the next year, the people that might have funded us before were doing their own events. That's kind of what happened to the people with the money, is they decided, let's don't just have a sponsorship of this event. Let's do our own. Let's rent a whole damn house or build office building or whatever. That's what happened. So
meanwhile, we're doing this super cool cultural event. And people are saying, well, do I go to the super cool cultural event here, or do I go over here where I can get a whole lot of free booze? They went for the free booze.
Yeah, free booze and hanging out with the stars du jour, whoever was popular then. We had a lot of that, Kanye showing up, people like that. And that tended to draw the crowds away from the funky, credible folks such as us.
Yeah, damn. Well, those were the days. So the 2011 event had as its greatest positive result the fact that we started this podcast as an adjunct to that event.
Yes, indeed. Serendipity there. We came up with something that survived. And
absolutely.
We're up to, how many podcasts now? It's over 200, I think.
I think so.
Closing in on that. And that's pretty good for a podcast to, toot our own horn here, because I've seen so many that, after, a few episodes, a lot of them go, oh, this is way too much work, and it's hard to get people to entertain or talk or educate on our show. And there'll be a lot of, 10-episode podcasts that are never heard from again. But it's nice to have a track record that goes back to 2018.
Yeah.
And it will
and
go
even
forward.
farther back if you count those initial
that's right.
Interviews that we did back in 2011.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We had some good people on those.
Yeah. So this might be a good time to mention what we're about. We never talk about it when we're interviewing other people, but the Plutopia News Network includes this podcast, but also includes a weekly talk show, in effect, on YouTube on Thursday nights, 7 to 8.
And
Central
a weekly
time.
music show. That's
our music show
on internet radio weekly. That's WEAKLY. No, I think there's two E's in there. It's that weekly, but we enjoy getting together, John and myself, for 2 hours of babbling and great music. And we'll be resuming. We've had a few missed shows recently, just due to various things happening. But I expect we'll be able to get back on board with Radio Free Plutopia very soon.
hopefully not next. Yeah, next week.
Next week. There we go. Come on down, folks. We're giving it away.
We'll be spinning platters again next week. But I should also mention that we offer all of this stuff for free, but that there is an opportunity to support us and help us cover our costs for, as little as $2 or $3 or $4. You could sign up as a Patreon sponsor at our website, plutopia.io, or you could donate cash if you think that this is something that you really enjoy and feel like you should be paying for it. We certainly would not discourage you.
But
we're not out to make a buck here. We're out to have a good time. But, we could use a little bit of money to pay the bills.
Yeah, we love to have you listen in. And we won't hit you up with a cover charge, although John may hit you up on the way out the door at the end. So one way or another.
Well, actually, I've been thinking about doing the Patreon thing a little more seriously. So the idea of Patreon is that you offer some content to people who sign up to be patrons that they can't get otherwise. And if we did that, it would be inconsistent with what we've ever done, because we've always just kind of put this stuff out there for anybody and everybody. But it might be interesting to see what we could come up with for patrons only.
Plutopia.
And if we decide to do that, of course, we'll make some noise about it.
Yeah, we could have Plutopia NFTs. There you go. Get a John Lebkowski NFT, and they can send us their cryptocurrency.
One thing I thought about was, and maybe people could let us know if they think this would be attractive, is to let people who sign up as patrons have access to our Slack.
Well,
where they could hang out with us, and listen to us babble incoherently, or see us babble in print incoherently, in addition to our incoherent babbling here on the podcast.
You could become an Austin Slacker. There's a shortage of those these days, it seems. Slackerville is now a storage locker, I think.
Oh, yeah. Lord. Another thing I would like to do is start a Discord. A Discord, which is basically a place where people can hang out and talk. So rather than have people come into our Slack, we could just set up a Discord server and invite people who are patrons.
Yeah, I think that might be a good approach, because Discord reminds me more of the old internet experience when we first started getting onto news groups and you know, BBS chats and things like that.
Yeah.
That was more like, you know, hanging out in the neighborhood, you know, bullshitting with people. And Facebook doesn't, you know, tries to do that, but it's kind of questionable when you have too many people.
It's quite like the Well, which is where I'm still hanging out part of the time. The Well being the Whole Earth Electronic Link, which is probably the oldest online community still standing. And it's still, you know, a place where people have intelligent conversations. They develop history with each other over time. It's a true community.
Yeah. Well,
I'd love to see us build one of those.
Well, we're running out of time on this well, so we will have to probably head off into the sunset since our hour is just
time
about
wounds
gone.
all heals.
Any final observations, Mr. John?
Not particularly. I'm looking forward to our next, whatever it is.
Well, stay tuned, folks, and we hope you'll be surprised or entertained or educated or some of the above, anyway.
Puzzled, you know, curious.
Outraged, perhaps. So we do that on occasion.
We can do that, yeah.
All right.
Okay, man.
That was fun, and we'll have more down the road.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
I
you.
will see you soon.
Later.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lepkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.